Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A mass killing in an Ottawa suburb leaves 6 people dead, including 4 children. The Alberta government announced more than $10 million in new funding for Lethbridge to help those who are battling homelessness. And with the federal carbon tax set to increase next month, we hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, who explains how devastating the levy has been to so many Canadians.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. 6 people were killed following a mass killing Wednesday night in Ottawa. Police say 4 children and 2 adults are among the dead. Police say the killings took place inside of a townhome in the suburb of Barrhaven. A spokesperson with the Sri Lankan High Commission says the dead include a Sri Lankan woman, her 4 children, and a family acquaintance. The father, also Sri Lankan, was injured but survived. A 19-year-old man who police say is Fabrio de Zoisa was arrested at the scene and is now charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. The lawyer for one of the 2 Michaels held captive in China for nearly 3 years says his client reached a settlement with the federal government. John Phillips says the matter between Michael Spavor and Ottawa has now been resolved. Media reports suggest the settlement was worth as much as $7 million. Spavor and diplomat Michael Kovrig were detained in 2018 when Canada found itself in a diplomatic crisis with both China and the United States. The arrests were seen as retaliation for the arrest of Huawei chief financial executive Meng Wanzhou on a U.S. extradition warrant. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government was with the 2 Michaels, supporting them throughout their ordeal.
We will continue to be there to support them. I think recognizing that no one should have had to go through that situation, that the decision by China to use them as pawns in geopolitical games was absolutely unacceptable, which is why we're continuing to support them and why we're actually working around the world on initiatives against arbitrary detention to make sure that no one anywhere gets used as a political pawn.
The federal carbon tax is going up around 23% on April the 1st. The federal levy has hurt so many, even with the rebates. You don't have to look much further than your home heating bills or prices at the pumps. Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas says the carbon tax continues to hit many of us hard at a time when we really need a break.
Canadians are paying through the roof when it comes to the carbon tax, whether it's on gas or groceries or home heating, and they're sick of it. Quite frankly, they can't afford it. Month over month, we saw 2 million people on average visit food banks across this country during 2023. In 2024, we're expecting upwards of 3 million people as a monthly average to go to food banks. I mean, this is not the Canada we know. This is supposed to be a place of opportunity and being able to further oneself. And instead, due to Trudeau's punitive policies, people are 2 steps back rather than 2 steps ahead. That's not okay.
MP Thomas will also give her thoughts on a recent class action lawsuit where Albertans are suing both the provincial and federal governments in relation to harms they say were caused during the COVID-19 pandemic. She'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says should Budget 2024 pass, the province will invest more than $8 billion for the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors 3-year capital plan. That would be an increase of around $136.4 million compared with last year's budget. Smith says a lot of the funding will go towards providing safe and efficient roads, highways, and bridges. Money will also be used towards upgrading water infrastructure.
But transportation and economic corridors doesn't only focus on the roads that we use every day. That's why we are also here to announce investments for water management infrastructure that provide irrigation and flood mitigation so that communities will be better protected in the event of extreme events. And with the province facing the critical risk of severe drought this year, these investments are all the more important, as are the capital grants for municipal water and wastewater infrastructure so that Albertans can rely on access to clean drinking water and effective wastewater services.
Lethbridge will be receiving new permanent supportive housing units thanks to an investment by the Alberta government. Officials say the $10.2 million investment will help to build new housing in our city to ensure those who are experiencing homelessness have a safe place to call home. Government officials explain the importance of this initiative.
The government continues to be focused on making sure that we don't only provide a home, which is important, but that we make sure that we are very focused on recovery, particularly when you're dealing with individuals that are facing addictions. Recovery will continue to be the focus of the Alberta government. We believe that we can work with addicts to be able to make sure to provide them long-term, sustainable, happy lives in our province with investment in things like recovery. And Alberta has just invested in unprecedented amount of recovery beds, thousands of new beds inside our province, and will continue to do that. And one of the roles that we have in my department responsible for housing is to connect to that work that is being led by the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction. And with facilities like that, this is what we're talking about today, that is what we're doing.
Studies have demonstrated that a significant proportion of community members experiencing homelessness in Lethbridge need supportive housing. This will provide a pathway out of homelessness and allow individuals to overcome or better manage issues related to developmental disabilities, substance abuse problems, and mental health issues.
Provincial government officials say last year they broke ground on or opened affordable and supportive housing in 6 communities affecting more than 400 Alberta households. Lethbridge city officials say their application to the federal government's Housing Accelerator Fund program was declined. They say they were disappointed by the news that Lethbridge will not be eligible for $6.25 million, which would have helped address some of the housing issues in our city. Officials say the Housing Accelerator Fund is a competitive grant. Out of the 544 applications received, just 179 received funding. The city's general manager of community social development, Andrew Malcolm, explains what reasoning the CMHC folks gave as to why Lethbridge did not receive a grant.
They did share their overarching message, which has been consistent from them, that the grant opportunity was very competitive and successful applicants needed to be ambitious, and they needed to show approaches that implemented structural reform, specifically around zoning restrictions, and even more particular, a focus on the end or the removal of exclusionary zoning.
In March of last year, CMHC announced the creation of the $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund program designed specifically for municipalities. You know, inflation has been hitting many Canadians hard, whether it's the cost of food, fuel, or even paying their rent or mortgage. Times have been very tough. It's also been difficult for us dog owners. According to a new report by HelloSafe, the average cost of owning a dog in Canada has risen more than 23%, from $2,450 in 2021 to $3,020 in 2024. The study found that annual expenses for smaller breeds were slightly less at $25.95, while the larger breeds cost owners around $46.05 each and every year. A lot of that has to do with the price increases for both dog food, toys, and other accessories, along with vet bills. Now, Canadian pet owners are facing huge vet bills, and sometimes, they go through the roof. More and more people are thinking of getting pet insurance to help alleviate the costs, especially when Fido or Fluffy has to get surgery. Insurance companies are saving pet owners tens of thousands of dollars each and every year for vet visits and treatment for chronic and terminal illnesses such as cancer. Joe Toffelon is the VP of Partnership with Spot Pet Insurance, and he says more people are understanding the practicality and value of getting pet insurance.
The benefits of having pet insurance is that, one, you can have peace of mind knowing that if anything does happen to your pet, a emergency or an illness or just a routine exam will be covered, and that you will have the funds to or the reimbursement to have those eligible vet bills covered. And then lastly, it's a real simple reimbursement process. You can visit any licensed vet in Canada, pay the bill yourself, and take a picture of your claim or submit it online, and we reimburse you. It's as easy as that. There's no networks, so you can visit any licensed vet.
Toffelon says depending upon the size and age of your pet, insurance premiums can be as low as $30 a month. Well, we enjoyed a slightly cooler day across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Roche is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though much warmer temperatures are just around the corner.
Yeah, that's right. Well, today wasn't horrible either. We did reach a daytime high of -3, which is still in that seasonal range, but just wait because this was the last day of minuses for a while. Starting Friday, we're looking at a high of 7 degrees, but where there are those warmer temperatures, there's also Chinook winds possible. Tomorrow is no exception. We're seeing a southwesterly wind from 20 to 40, and then shifting to westerly winds gusting up to 60 kilometers per hour. So going to be a bit of a wind windy one tomorrow on Friday, but sunny and above zero. So that's a win. And I'll be back later in the show to tell you how much warmer it's going to get on Saturday. And here's a sneak peek. We're talking double digits, Hal. I'll be back later.
Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Weapons manufacturers are being given $4.4 million by the Canadian government to come up with a plan to make more NATO standard 155mm ammunition as the war between Ukraine and Russia drags on. Federal Defense Minister Bill Blair says the Ukrainian military is in dire need of more ammunition. Blair says Canada this year alone will supply Ukraine with over $3 billion worth of military aid.
And altogether, so far, Canada's committed more than $4 billion in military assistance since the war began. Everything from tanks to armored vehicles to ammunition to drones. We've also been helping Ukraine protect its systems from malicious cyber activity and sharing vital intelligence. And I'm very proud to say we've trained members of the Ukrainian military, their combat medics and sappers in Poland, new recruits in the United Kingdom, junior officers in Latvia, and many more. And in fact, beginning in 2015, since 2015, we trained more than 40,000 members of the Ukraine's military through Operation Unifier. We've been teaching everything from combat survivability to patrol tactics to demining. And earlier this week, I had the opportunity and privilege to visit CFB Edmonton to meet with Canadian troops there who have trained Ukrainians with life-saving demining skills.
Sweden has formally joined NATO as the 32nd member of the Transatlantic Military Alliance. This officially ended decades of post-World War II neutrality. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the announcement.
We've known from day one that we would be here today, and now we are. This is a historic moment for Sweden. It's historic for our alliance. It's historic for the transatlantic relationship. Our NATO alliance, our defensive alliance, is now stronger and larger than it's ever been. Swedes realize something very profound, that if Putin was willing to try to erase one neighbor from the map, then he might well not stop there. And if he was allowed to proceed with impunity, not only would his aggression potentially continue, but would-be aggressors everywhere would get the message that it was open season.
It appears as though families in Gaza are now forming defense committees to really protect themselves from the terrorist group Hamas. According to TBN Israeli correspondent Yair Pinto, the families are trying to defend their homes from looting and to ensure humanitarian aid is not stolen by Hamas.
It's understandable that they fear displacement and disagree about the future control of the Gaza Strip. Most of them actually prefer Israeli rule in Gaza and are worried about allowing Hamas to continue to rule as if nothing happened. In the meantime, as a result of the chaos caused by the power vacuum left by Hamas, many families in Gaza have established defense committees against other armed elements. These militias are not defending themselves from the IDF. They are defending themselves from Hamas militants and all kinds of other militias in the Gaza Strip. These families want to protect their property and their homes from looting, a threat that is becoming very common in the anarchy created by the war. They are working in close cooperation with the IDF because they want to make sure that the humanitarian aid that reaches Gaza is truly delivered to citizens who need it and not stolen by Hamas or lost in the chaos of riots and looting.
Artificial intelligence, or AI, can be used to write social media posts, create images, and soundtracks for weekly announcements. It can even be used to generate a sermon online. As we hear this next story, the challenge for the church, however, is understanding how to harness the power of AI in a way that really preserves the integrity of the gospel message.
It has been compared to the discovery of fire or the invention of the printing press. The World Economic Forum recently called it the steam engine of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. What is this revolutionary technology? It's artificial intelligence, or AI, and it is capturing the imagination of nearly every business that makes up the information economy in the 21st century. And the church is beginning to take notice.
So it's always constantly about how do we leverage this technology that God's put in our midst.
Carl Romas is a pastor at Flatirons Community Church in northern Colorado, and he's begun to incorporate AI in his workflow.
There's a parts of it that we yet don't understand in the ability that's going to give us to leverage the communication of the gospel. And I think as pastors and as ministry leaders begin to practice and play with it, really like anything else, with any new piece of technology, you'll get more comfortable with it.
Historically, the church has been interested in new communication technology as a means to an end, and that end, of course, is advancing the gospel. Scott Beck is the CEO and co-founder of Glue, a tech firm located in Boulder, Colorado, that is working hard to come up with answers that will give pastors and church leaders a reason to look more closely at the potential of AI.
It's all about advancing human flourishing at the end of the day. And, that's what pastors do. That's what churches do. That's what local ministries do. They care about people. Well, the AI, the technology can help become superpowers in their hands so that they can serve more people. They can help those people on the right next step in their growth journey.
AI tools like those provided by Church.tech can be used to streamline the process of preparing sermons and other content for distribution on social media, or repackaging the content for small group applications. Another feature allows for revising a message for age-specific audiences.
We can create specific questions for a sixth grader about stewardship, and then they get that text message, mom and dad get that text message, and now they're in the car driving home or at lunch on a Sunday afternoon, and mom and dad can look down at their phone and ask their son or daughter a question that's age appropriate that directly connects to the message that they both just heard together. So from a 5-year-old all the way to my 72-year-old mom, we'll all be able to engage on the content from the weekend really from their level. So it's a fantastic opportunity that we have.
You gotta love technology, wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to see the sunshine again today, mainly clear sky in Lethbridge, temperatures just below zero, but fortunately, the mercury is increasing and it's warming up quite a bit over the next week or so. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. We enjoyed lots of sunshine today in Lethbridge, but slightly cooler, just below zero. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though the mercury will be climbing to the point where we almost may not need to wear a jacket by the weekend.
Oh, you are so right about that, Hal. Check this out. Look at these temperatures. So beginning Friday, looks like today was the last day of minuses, at least for a while, hopefully forever. Okay, so as we're looking to Friday, we're seeing high of 7 degrees. Just keep in mind those wind gusts because we could see those Chinook winds up to 60K tomorrow. After that, we're looking at a possible double-digit day on Saturday, high of 11 degrees. 8 for a high on Sunday, 9 on Monday. There's the double digits again on Tuesday, high of 10 degrees, and then 9 degrees to round out that 7-day forecast on Wednesday. So average high for this time of year, 4 degrees. We're going to be well above that starting Saturday. -8 is the average low. 18 was our high temperature on, that happened back in 2005. That was the hot day for this calendar day, and then the cold record was back in 1951. It was -34 Burr. Okay, 7 exactly on the dot. That's when the sun rose this morning. 6:25 is our sunset this evening. We are now at 11 hours, 25 minutes of daylight, 3 minutes more sunlight than we saw yesterday. Okay, Victoria seeing a chance of some showers there, 9 for a high. Vancouver, very heavy rains, 15 to 25 millimeters expected tomorrow, 8 degrees for a high there. 4 for a high in Edmonton, seeing mainly clear skies and a mix of sun and cloud expected tomorrow. In Calgary with a high of 7 degrees. As we get into the rest of the prairies, we're still seeing those high wind chill values in the morning, particularly in Saskatoon and Regina. In the morning particularly, we're seeing those -20 somethings. -5 for a daytime high though in Saskatoon, -7 in Regina, and -6 in Winnipeg. Mostly clear skies across those prairies as well, except a bit of cloud coverage in the Winnipeg area. Toronto sitting at 8 degrees tomorrow with clear skies, sunshine in Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow. Both of those cities looking at highs of 9 degrees. As we get into Atlantic Canada, here's where we got a lot of things going on. Not so much in Fredericton, mix of sun and cloud there, 2 for a high. In Halifax, we are seeing actually a rainfall warning, and in fact, we could see up to 60 millimeters of rain tomorrow, and then that rain transit, actually that's tonight. So overnight, periods of rain, and then that rain transitioning to freezing rain, ice pellets, snow, and then all of that tapering off by the morning tomorrow in Halifax. 1 for a high there. Charlottetown still seeing that freezing rain warning in effect this evening. By tomorrow, though, sun and cloud, -1 for high, -1 as well is the expected high tomorrow in St. John's. But here's what's happening. We have a winter storm warning in effect for the northern peninsula, including St. John's and vicinity. Could see up to 85 centimeters of snow between Thursday night and Saturday morning, and then blowing snow as well in St. John's with up to 60 winds tomorrow. So lots going on there. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Alberta-based consultancy firm North Economics compared fees at Canada's Big Five banks with fees in Britain and Australia. Now, the study revealed that Canadians are overpaying by more than $7.7 billion a year. Canadians pay much more per month for bank accounts, fees for non-sufficient funds, overdraft charges, and accessing ATMs at competitors' banks. The Canadian Bankers Association said that 37% of Canadians report not having an account fee. Canadian imports fell to their lowest level since February of 2022 during the month of January. Stats Canada reports the country posted a merchandise trade surplus of $496 million. Total imports fell 3.8% to $61.8 billion, while total exports fell 1.7% to $62.3 billion. Automobile dealership group Auto Canada is reporting a loss in its fourth quarter compared to a profit from a year earlier. The company says it lost $22.6 million, or 81 cents per share for the quarter, which ended on December 31st. That compares with a profit of $14.8 million, or 52 cents per diluted share it earned a year earlier. Revenue rose nearly 7% to $1.48 billion. That's up from $1.39 billion from its fourth quarter of 2022. Now, here's something you don't see every day: a green self-driving delivery robot moving through the streets of Tokyo. It's on a mission to pick up a meal from a restaurant for an order on Uber Eats. Uber Eats Japan is collaborating with Mitsubishi Electric and a delivery robotics firm to launch an autonomous delivery robot service, which began on Wednesday.
We are finding out in which areas that will be suitable. For now, we are testing Nihonbashi area. We believe that with the sidewalks, everything, it's going to be suitable. Eventually, tall buildings too, it can be useful because it may integrate with the elevators. We may be able to deliver up to offices, etc. So although the robot is autonomous, so you actually don't need an operator. It can run by itself. It can know where to go once you upload the map locations, right? It can navigate exactly how to get there. But there's always a human operator in the background watching the robots to ensure that in the event of any emergency, there's very quick response. So yeah, it's robot out there, but there's a human in the back, right? So it's really safe operations.
What a cool idea. I think we need one of those for the TV station. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 200 points on the day to finish at 21,794. The Dow was up 130 points to 38,791. The S&P 500 was up 52 on the day to 5157, and the Nasdaq was up 241 points to 16,273. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 20 cents to 78.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to $1.82 US. Gold was up 11.80 on the day to 2159.98 US an ounce, and silver was up 16 cents to 24.33 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.16 per bushel, barley's at $6.12, canola's at $13.26, and corn is at $7.37 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was up $1.48 to $188.73. Feeder cattle were unchanged at $251.03, and lean hogs April contract was down 48 cents to $84.53. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.29 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Lethbridge will be receiving new permanent supportive housing and different units thanks to an investment by the Alberta government. Officials say the $10.2 million investment will help to build new housing in our city to ensure those who are experiencing homelessness have a safe place to call home. You know, the federal carbon tax is having a devastating impact on so many Canadians, even with the rebates we're receiving from Ottawa. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas will have more details for us momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, please drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of local stories and interviews. We learned this week that the federal government is open to potentially changing the Emergencies Act. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Ottawa will consider a number of recommendations from the Justice Rouleau report, which came out last year, talking around 22 changes. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Lethbridge MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachel Thomas, who joins us here from the Windy City. Rachel, welcome back to BCN.
Hey, Hal, thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, in your opinion, what are some of the recommendations from the Rouleau report that maybe need adopting when it comes to the Emergencies Act?
I think it's first important just to remind ourselves here just for a moment as to what happened here. So the Emergencies Act, of course, was incited by the Prime Minister, and it was his response to what was known as the trucker convoy in Ottawa. And of course, we had truckers from all across the country fill the streets there in the nation's capital. And the reason they did so is because they were against vaccine mandates was one of the big things that they were against. But more importantly, they were against the Prime Minister's divisive politics. He was certainly trying to, stigmatize and divide us as Canadians. And so they were protesting that, and they had every right to do so. The Prime Minister, in a rage of glory, decided that he was going to enact the Emergencies Act. What has been determined now from the federal courts is actually that he moved that act unnecessarily. Now, of course, Trudeau can't accept that ruling, and so he's taking it to be challenged. But nevertheless, that ruling has been made. And so it doesn't surprise me that Minister Dominic LeBlanc then is saying they need more time. They're going to need more time probably for a long time to actually make any changes or implement any of the 56 recommendations. To answer your question directly, Hal, look, the number one recommendation out of that report that should be enacted today, it should not take any further consideration, is he said, point blank, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms needs to be upheld. That's a no-brainer. Yeah, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms needed to be upheld from day one and never should have been violated. And so I would start there, and then I would continue implementing a number of his other recommendations.
Rachel, another class action lawsuit has been launched against both the federal and provincial governments on behalf of Albertans who were vaccine injured or who lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, what are your thoughts when you hear about some civil lawsuits such as this?
Yeah, I think first my heart breaks for those that did suffer a vaccine injury. I've certainly sat in my office with a few of these folks who have suffered because of the vaccine that they took, and it's been proven through medical assessments and documentation. And then, they've applied for assistance from a federal program that was set up in order to respond. And it's been hurdle after hurdle, unfortunately. There's been so many gatekeepers in the way of receiving the payout that is due to them, the medications that they should be given, the therapies that they should have access to. And so I'm trying to help these folks be able to access those things that they rightly deserve. So it doesn't surprise me that this case has come forward. I think people have suffered a tremendous amount, and they have every right to bring a civil case like this to the courts, and I look forward to watching the process unfold.
Now, we received more insight into the Winnipeg lab story, Rachel, but once again, it appears as though the Trudeau government, assisted by the NDP, appears to be stopping us from finding out more. Now, some of the recent information released is that one of the two fired scientists, Dr. Key, was doing some work to benefit China. Now, that included working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, transferring various viruses, including Ebola. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. So we have evidence that there were significant security breaches starting in 2018 from these two scientists who were working on behalf of, the PRC, and not only transferring, important information, top secret information, but also, incredibly dangerous pathogens. And so, of course, this is a massive security breach and raises significant questions pertaining to our country's ability to maintain security and sovereignty. And obviously, this is a huge failure by the Liberal government. And so it's no wonder why Mr. Trudeau stood in our way every single time we took initiative to ask for documents and seek further information on this. I mean, Trudeau went to great lengths, including taking the Speaker of the House of Commons to court to try to prevent the release of these documents. We now have over 600 pages of incredibly condemning documentation with regard to what has happened in this lab and the illegal transfer of information. And it's incredibly startling. And I think Canadians certainly deserve all of the answers. So we will continue as Conservatives to push for that and try our best to get to the bottom of what happened here. And I think most importantly, you know, going forward under Conservative government, we would make sure that there is greater security brought to this lab and to our country as a whole, and make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
You know, it appears as though Canadians are really taking notice of some of these serious issues, Rachel. The latest polls show that the Trudeau Liberals are around 17 points behind your party, the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives. But how can you really maintain that momentum? An election is not expected until the fall of 2025.
Yeah, it's a good question, Hal. I think it's I think in some ways it's simple in the sense that this is truly who we are. This is us as Conservatives living our values, the things that matter most to us, because we believe that they matter most to Canadians. And so when we say we're going to axe the carbon tax, we're going to build the homes, we're going to fix the budget, we're going to stop the crime, we mean it. We mean it. There is no other message that is more important than that. Because these are the four things that we're hearing from Canadians as their priorities, and therefore they are our priorities. And so to continue going forward on that message and to continue building momentum on behalf of Canadians and standing up for their needs, I don't believe is a problem for us at all, because that is what it is to lead. That is what it is to form government. It's to be on the side of the working people.
Now let's talk about that carbon tax for just a moment here, Rachel. It's going up April 1st by around 23%. That'll make life so much harder for so many of us who use natural gas to heat our homes and filling up our vehicles. Now we do receive rebates, but oftentimes the rebates are simply not enough. Now your leader, Pierre Poilievre, keeps blasting the Prime Minister, saying, like you said, he needs to axe the tax, but why isn't the message getting through? Cannot Trudeau see how so many Canadians are struggling right now?
Unfortunately, Hal, I think the message is getting through in the sense that the Prime Minister knows Canadians don't like the carbon tax. It's why he paid costly consultants to help him do a rebrand. He knows Canadians hate it. And so he tried to come up with some new spiffy name in hopes that he could perhaps, you know, get Canadians on side. The fact of the matter is they're not. Canadians are paying through the roof when it comes to the carbon tax, whether it's on gas or groceries or home heating, and they're sick of it. Quite frankly, they can't afford it. You know, month over month, we saw 2 million people on average visit food banks across this country during 2023. In 2024, we're expecting upwards of 3 million people as a monthly average to go to food banks. I mean, this is not the Canada we know. This is supposed to be a place of opportunity and being able to further oneself. And instead, due to Trudeau's punitive policies, people are, you know, 2 steps back rather than 2 steps ahead. That's not okay.
Now, MPs, as you know, are in line for another pay raise on April the 1st. But Rachel, is this really necessary, especially with so many Canadians hurting right now? Have you and your party maybe questioned the PM on this? The timing is a little off, don't you think?
That's a fair question, Hal. I think what you're referring to is on April 1st, there's an automatic legislated raise of 2% for all elected officials within the House of Commons. This is something that Prime Minister Stephen Harper froze in 2008. He enacted legislation that would not allow us to receive those raises. It was Trudeau's first step when he became Prime Minister to reenact that in 2015. So at the end of the day, it is legislated. I've indicated that I would rather not receive it. Unfortunately, I've been told by the HR department that I'm not allowed to refuse. It's something that is legislated and therefore automatic. All that to say, I think you're right, Hal. Canadians are suffering. They're certainly finding it very difficult to make ends meet. And I do believe that as leaders of this country, it is up to us to go first and to make sure that we're in step with them. And so I would be in favor of seeing that frozen.
You know what, here's a thought. How about take the extra money that the MPs are going to make from that legislative increase and put it towards food banks across the country and support our food banks? Rachel, as you know, there's an election this fall coming up in the United States. Donald Trump is the last remaining strong Republican candidate, with Nikki Haley suspending her campaign. Now, Trump has been called a protectionist, America first in the past, but you know what? U.S. President Joe Biden hasn't been much better. How would your party handle things differently should you form government in 2025 when it comes to dealing with protectionist presidents affecting trade between Canada and the United States and our jobs?
Great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind actually is, given that Prime Minister Brian Mulroney just passed away not too long ago, he comes to mind. In 1989, he is the one who achieved a free trade agreement with the United States of America. And the way that he went about that was through relationship building and knowing that there was a benefit for both countries. And of course, we know that that free trade agreement has served Canada incredibly well. It would be our hope as Conservatives to continue to protect that relationship, to continue to advance that relationship. And to that end, we already have members of Parliament who are going to Washington on a regular basis in order to build that bridge and make sure that when we form government, we're ready to hit the road running.
Now, the Trudeau government is giving the CBC $1.4 billion, an increase in funding, despite executives insisting that they received a request to cut the public broadcaster's budget. Now, this is one of the reasons why they announced they were laying off around 10% of their workforce. So with the extra funding, do you think that means more jobs will be saved and executives will be receiving their bonuses thanks to the Canadian taxpayer?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know that it's going to result in more jobs being saved, but it is perhaps going to result in more big bonuses being given to the top executives. I think Catherine Tate has made it really clear that her intent is to cut 800 jobs. She made that announcement just before Christmas, even before she knew what the final budget line would be. And then when she came to committee at the end of January, we asked her if she herself felt she deserved a bonus. And her answer was, quote, absolutely yes, end quote. And so here's someone who, has led the CBC during one of its most disastrous points in history, and yet believes that she deserves this supposed performance bonus. She goes on to contend for, her executive team and believes that they deserve the same. So this is not someone who is interested in saving jobs. This is someone who is interested in saving her job and saving bonuses for those that are at the top.
Now, Rachel, you've mentioned on social media in the past that your party wants to get to the bottom of the, quote, Arrive scam scandal, an app that was supposed to cost $80,000 for Canadian taxpayers ballooned up to over $60 million. How is that going right now?
Yeah, again, I appreciate the question. Look, during COVID, the government decided to create an app known as Arrive Can. We now call it the Arrive Scam. The reason being is because the Prime Minister promised Canadians that it would only cost $80,000. However, a recent Auditor General report shows that it cost at least $60 million. Now, the reason we don't know the exact cost is because actually the Auditor General wasn't able to find paperwork for a whole lot of these contracts. And so what we know is that it was at least 60 million, but it could have been even more. And what we also know based on the Auditor General's report is really it was a ton of money being given out to friends by the Liberals. One of the businesses was GC Strategies. They received $20 million. This is a company composed of two people working out of a basement. They even admit that they didn't do any of the work themselves. Instead, they subcontracted it out. What the Auditor General's report, showed further was that 76% of those that received contracts didn't actually do any work on the app. So it means that there was this payout for them, but they didn't actually contribute to its creation. So we have to ask the question, what happened here? I mean, this is a massive boondoggle, and this is a whole lot of Canadian taxpayer money that is being handed out to Liberal insiders. It's wrong, and there does need to be great accountability. And so as Conservatives, we're insisting on that. And so we continue to apply pressure both at committee and in the House of Commons on a daily basis.
Now I want to talk to Rachel Thomas, the Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage. Now, you also posted on social media how the Liberals need to be held to account by not spending so many tax dollars on those flashy business class seats as they travel to explore Canadian culture. Can you explain in more detail?
Sure. At Heritage Committee, there was discussion around whether or not we should travel for committee. And the Liberal members were quite keen that we should travel. And the chair of the committee, Hetty Fry from Vancouver, offered that the reason we should spend this money on traveling across Canada was to hear from those that she referred to as, quote, Joe Schmo. She went on to explain that this travel was necessary so that we listened to regular Canadians, because in Ottawa, in her mind, we didn't take that opportunity. What I find interesting about this is, look, as elected officials, we have every opportunity to listen to regular Canadians. That's what we should be doing every single day that we are in our ridings. That is our job. That is what we are elected for. And so we don't need to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on business class tickets to travel across the country to do that. We just need to put our boots on the ground in our ridings and actually do the work we were elected to do. Certainly as the local member of parliament for Lethbridge, that's what I'm committed to. So I'll continue to be here and be present and listen to those that are, in this community. And my hope would be that my Liberal colleagues would hopefully do the same.
Lethbridge Conservative MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachel Thomas, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Hal. Nice to be with you.
Some say the time change can have a serious impact on our bodies and our minds. Well, today's guest is going to share some expertise on this subject. We're joined by Professor Rob McDonald. He's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News. Dr. McDonald, great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is a subject that everyone's talking about this week, obviously. So a lot of people like that extra hour of light so that we can do outdoor activities a little longer. But apparently there are some negatives that come along with this, like sleeping issues and even mood changes. So how serious are these sleeping issues and mood changes? Are we talking about losing a day or two of sleep or having a bad day now and then? Or are we talking like long-term depression and insomnia?
Yeah, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. These are acute effects, relatively minor. So maybe mood changes, you're a little grouchier, you're going to lose some sleep. There can be cognitive effects, so you're not as good at work or at school, but they'll dissipate over probably in a week. So, but there's a bigger issue here, and it's not really the shifting per se, but there's other issues around the way that we're setting up our time schedules in society.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, is it just me or did we not just have a time change back in November? That was only like 4 months ago. It felt like so short of a time. Why even bother?
It's a great question. Why are we doing it?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know I personally like the extra light at the end of the day when you're off of work. It makes you feel more productive. And then you get that shift in November when suddenly you're dark at 4 o'clock. And I don't know. Other people would argue, of course, that they would prefer to have it be standard time all the time. I'm one of those, let's just keep daylight savings time all the time.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, the evidence is that standard time is, and most people in my field agree, and we don't agree on much. Yeah. Standard time is the best for the way that our clock is designed.
Interesting. Okay.
So we should be on constant standard time.
Okay. I'll go against the grain there and say always daylight savings, but maybe, can you maybe tell us a bit about how our minds and our bodies work together? Because you just mentioned our body clocks are kind of more set to standard time. So is there actually some kind of an internal clock that can be affected by light?
That's right. So deep inside your brain is this tiny little nucleus. It's only like 20,000 neurons. But it has a huge impact on the brain. You know, the brain is 80, 90 billion cells. So these 20,000 neurons have a very significant impact on your daily brain and body function. So we consider this the master clock. And it's approximately 24 hours, a little bit longer than that. And because it's a bit longer, it has to be set somehow. And the way it's set is there's receptors in your eye that go directly deep to that clock and set it every morning.
That's fascinating. That's so okay, so I'm curious if the negative effects of time changes are less severe in the autumn because we gain that hour of sleep, or is it basically the same?
No, it's not. So you're completely correct. A phase advance is much more difficult for the circadian system to deal with, and it's much harder on your brain and body. The delay is easier, just the vagaries of the way the system is designed. One thing I didn't mention about this master clock, I mean, it's great to have a clock, and we didn't really understand, well, how does it influence brain and body function? Well, it turns out there's peripheral clocks too. So there's clocks all over your brain and body. So different parts of your brain that do different things have their own little clocks. Your lungs, your liver, your stomach, all of these have their own clocks, but they're set by the master clock. Okay, and so what can happen when we have these daylight savings, for example, or when people have to do shift work, the clock gets misaligned with the peripheral clock. It's telling the peripheral clock to do something when it shouldn't be doing it. So you get this dysregulation of brain and body function.
Yeah, you're talking about people working shift work. I mean, they have a whole other set of issues, don't they, because of what they go through?
That's right. And we've been studying shift work for decades now. We're really fascinated with it. And we think it's really bad for people. And in fact, shift work is considered a carcinogen, but it also has effects on heart disease, obesity, and a lot of our work has shown it is directly linked to Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating study, absolutely. Is it true that during daylight savings times, we have more car accidents, more heart attacks, strokes, workplace accidents?
That actually comes from the shift. So when we're doing this phase advance in particular, the spring forward, there is a statistically significant uptick in those things, but it's not the biggest effect in the world. But it is suggesting that, you know, this circadian shift is having impacts, and it's probably happening to people who already have heart problems or right. So it's people who are going to be more susceptible.
Okay, so getting back to people that work shift work, and this is their life all the time.
Right.
Do you have any advice for those people? What are they to do when that's their job? They can't really
Yeah,
get
that is
away
very
from it.
difficult. I don't see a way forward unless we use robots and AI for nurses and
Right.
firefighters and policemen. They have to do it. And so one line of research in our laboratory is we're pursuing this idea of circadian resilience. So it turns out that certain people seem to be very resilient to shift work, and other people, it's terrible. And what we're suspecting is a lot of people who are not very resilient to it, they actually peel off away from those kinds of jobs. And the people who are remaining have very resilient circadian systems, but they're still having health problems. As they age, they're still having obesity problems, diabetes problems. So the effects are probably even worse than we think they are. And for them, it's very difficult. I mean, it depends on the way the shifts are done, but it's better if you can stay on the same shift and not go back and forth from, let's say, the day shift or the morning shift to the afternoon to the night. That is much more difficult. Your circadian clock cannot keep up with those shifts.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Never mind doing it. Yeah. Okay. So, are there some practical things people can do to lessen the negative effects of time change?
Yeah, so I mean, there's ways you can do it, but I can't imagine most people have the time to do it. So one way would be to, if you're predicting you're going to travel somewhere, you start very slowly using something like a light device you get up a little bit earlier each day, 15 or 10 minutes, and you just start getting this blast of light, and you just get closer and closer to the new time that you're going to go to. You can do that. I don't know a human that does that very often.
For sure. Yeah.
But when you travel, for example, one of the things you can do is you very quickly go on to the new light dark cycle, and you go out and exercise, and you try to maintain your circadian routine if you can. It's hard though. I mean, it takes almost a week You know, you go on a week trip to Europe and you're just barely getting set, and then you have to leave again.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Now, if we compare maybe populations from the northern hemisphere compared to those in the middle and the southern zones, can we see differences in health with more or less daylight hours? And, you know, for example, are those in Grand Prairie healthier than in Lethbridge?
Fascinating question. So, I mean, as you know, there's problems with correlation and causation. So, there is a lot of correlational evidence to suggest that there are health and mental health effects of being up in the north, but they are confounded by so many other factors that it's very hard to determine causation. If you go to areas like northern Scandinavian countries, for example, you'll see that they use light in their daily lives. So they have devices that are actually they use early in the morning to make sure that they get the light that they need. It's a very difficult area to study, but from everything we know in the field from the last 100 years, it must be having an impact because you have this 24-hour clock, and yet the light dark cycle is way off.
Yeah, have there been any studies done on people who live in the time change like we do compared to, you know, areas that don't do the time change? Like I think Arizona doesn't, for example.
There are countries and provinces, for example, that are going. So, for example, Saskatchewan has gone to standard time. I know that Russia for a while did straight up daylight savings time, and there was such an uproar because people did not like it at all. They were actually feeling the effects, and they pulled away from it. There is correlational evidence that suggests that it's going to have negative effects. And even just living, like if you're in a time zone, if you're on the western part of that time zone, the effects are much more severe than if you're on the eastern part, just because the light takes longer to get to the end of the time zone.
Ugh, isn't that interesting? And what about, like, do we know if there's any negative effects of daylight savings time that impacts certain groups of people more than others? For example, males versus females, or older people versus younger people?
Yes, this is a line of work we've been working on for decades, and there's no doubt aged people are more susceptible. And one of the lines of research we're looking at is as you age, people fall into sort of two groups, good circadian agers and poor circadian agers. And there's a very strong relationship between the health of your clock and dementia.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And sorry, yeah, just one other thing. So you were raising this issue about the long-term effects of this kind of daylight savings. Daylight savings, it's not completely clear, but anytime you have more light at night, it's going to have a huge impact. And so you were saying that the day in the summers and that it's great to have all of that time, but your brain is being told to stay up when it actually should be going to sleep. So it's not only having less in the morning, but it's also having too much light at night. And that's why the clock gets misaligned during daylight savings time.
Oh, that's interesting. Especially, you know, we live in Canada, so in the summertime, we have very short nights because I know, like it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night and it's still light out. And then the sun's already rising at what, 3:45 or something. So
one of the most compelling effects that we've found in terms of differences is males and females, which really surprised us. And it seems like females seem to be more resilient to circadian disruptions, particularly on the cognitive side. And we've argued that there's an evolutionary reason for that. That is because females tend to take such a bulk of the parenting role early on when the offspring have terrible circadian rhythms and they're waking up at all times of day of night. They have become more resilient to that.
That's fascinating. I mean, you know, I was going to ask, why are some people far more seriously impacted than others by daylight savings time? But you're kind of explaining some of that a little bit right there. Men versus women.
We don't know. We don't know what the mechanisms are.
Yeah.
So that's a whole line of research that's going to go. Is it differences in the receptors in the eye? Is it difference in terms of the machinery of the clock? There's a whole bunch of different interesting avenues of research to look at.
Yeah. So would you say, like, out of the three choices, to stay with the current switching of times, or year-round daylight savings, or year-round standard time, which is the best? You would say standard time.
Standard time.
Okay, interesting. And, you know, I mean, switching our gears from sleep, I understand that even eating at times that are outside of our normal routine can affect our internal clock. Is that right?
That's right. So the way that the field sort of thought about the master clock and those peripheral oscillators was the master clock sent its signal and they did whatever they were told. Now we know that there's reciprocal information. That is, those clocks are sending information to the master and vice versa. So when you eat, you know, a meal at a time you should not be, it can actually go back to the clock and reset it.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So it's like we have a Big Ben inside of us somewhere.
There's a lot of clocks and they need to be aligned. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to add about this topic that I didn't ask?
I think just the sleep issue. So people sometimes conflate sleep with circadian, and they're not the same.
Okay.
So they're completely different circuits in the brain that mediate sleep and mediate circadian rhythms. The relationship between them is that the circadian clock pushes you into sleep, and then it pushes you to awake. So it's not involved in sleep per se or sleep architecture or any of that. It's actually making you fall asleep and making you wake up.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for being with us today, Professor McDonald. Great to have you on.
Oh, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Awesome. Dr. Robert McDonald is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.